What is the price of betrayal? For Sebastian Thorne, a man who had everything, it was a price he never thought he'd have to pay. On a sun-drenched afternoon, in a cathedral filled with New York's elite, he stood at the altar and made a choice. He shattered the heart of his sweet, unassuming fiancée, Lena, for a woman who promised him the world. He chose ambition. He chose power. But in the most spectacular twist of fate, Sebastian was about to learn he had just thrown away the keys to an empire beyond his wildest dreams. He didn't just leave a woman at the altar. He abandoned the real heiress. This is the story of how the quiet girl he discarded came back to claim her throne and exact the most devastating revenge imaginable. The light filtering through the stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue was by all accounts angelic. It painted kaleidoscopic patterns on the marble floors and across the faces of New York's high society, a veritable who's who of finance, art, and old money. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 white lilies and the low, expectant hum of a crowd waiting for a fairy tale to conclude. At the center of it all stood Lena Vance, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. In a simple yet breathtakingly elegant Vera Wang gown, she felt like an imposter. She was a librarian, an archivist from NYU, with a passion for dusty first editions and the quiet solitude of history. How had she ended up here, about to marry Sebastian Thorne, the city's most formidable real estate magnate? She looked at him, standing all and impossibly handsome in his Tom Ford tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a universe of ambition. For 2 years, he had been her world. He'd found her charming, a refreshing escape from the piranha-infested waters he swam in daily. He loved her quiet intelligence, her kindness, the way she wasn't impressed by his billions, but by the stories he told of his childhood. Or so she thought. The organ music swelled a majestic piece by Bach that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cathedral. This was it. The officiant, a bishop whose attendance was a testament to Sebastian's influence, smiled benevolently. "Do you, Sebastian Alexander Thorne," the bishop began, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, "take this woman, Lena Vance, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part." A beat of silence. Then another. The expectant hum of the crowd faltered, replaced by a tense, electric stillness. Lena's smile trembled at the edges. She saw a flicker of something in Sebastian's eyes. Not love, not nervousness, but a cold, hard calculation. He cleared his throat. He turned his gaze from the bishop to her, and the warmth she had come to cherish was gone, replaced by an Arctic frost. "I can't," he said. The 2 words were quiet, yet they detonated in the silence like a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the pews. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Her bouquet of peonies and lily-of-the-valley suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Sebastian, what are you saying?" She whispered, her voice a fragile thread. He wouldn't meet her eyes fully. He stared at a point just past her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Lena. I truly am. But I can't do this." He took a half step back, a physical severing of their connection. This was a mistake. Suddenly a figure emerged from the front pew. Isabella Rossi, in a blood-red dress that was a scandal in itself, glided towards the altar. Isabella was Sebastian's head of public relations, a woman as sharp and polished as a shard of obsidian. She was everything Lena wasn't: aggressive, overtly sensual, and dripping with the kind of ambition that left bodies in its wake. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on Sebastian's arm. "It's all right, Sebastian," Isabella murmured, her voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "You're making the right choice, the strong choice." The puzzle pieces slammed into place in Lena's mind, each one a fresh wave of agony. The late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls, the scent of a strange, expensive perfume on his jacket. It wasn't work. It was her. Sebastian looked from Isabella's triumphant smirk back to Lena's shattered face. "Isabella, she understands my world, what it takes. She offers a future, a partnership that can build an empire. You offer comfort, Lena, and comfort doesn't close deals on skyscrapers." And the cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He was reducing their love, their life together, into a business liability. He was liquidating her right here in front of the world. The flashes of cameras began a predatory storm of light as the press, smelling blood, abandoned all pretense of decorum. Lena stood frozen, the world tilting on its axis. She felt hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, some pitiful, some scornful, all judging. She could feel the headline already forming as "Tycoon Dumps Librarian at Altar for Vixen Exec." Her humiliation was to be tomorrow's gossip column fodder. But then something shifted within her. Deep beneath the shock and the heartbreak, a core of steel long dormant began to glow. It was the legacy of her grandfather, a man who had built an empire from nothing and had taught her that dignity was the one thing no one could take from you unless you gave it away. She did not cry. She did not scream. She lifted her chin, her eyes locking onto Sebastian's for one final searing moment. She let him see the pain he had caused, but she also let him see that he had not and could not break her. She turned to her maid of honor, her best friend, Chloe, whose face was a mask of furious disbelief. "Chloe, my wrap, please." With a steady hand, Lena took the silk wrap and draped it over her shoulders. Then she turned to the crowd, her posture unnaturally straight. An elderly, distinguished-looking man with kind eyes and a grim face was already moving towards the aisle. It was Mr. Davies, her family's longtime confidant and lawyer. He reached her side, offering a silent, sturdy arm. Without a single word to Sebastian or Isabella, Lena Vance, the jilted bride, walked away from the altar. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the cathedral, a crisp, defiant rhythm against the cacophony of whispers and camera shutters. She was walking away from Sebastian Thorne, but as the heavy oak doors closed behind her, everyone would soon learn she was walking towards her destiny. And Sebastian Thorne had just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his life. The black Bentley purred through the gates of a sprawling estate in Westchester County, a world away from the media circus engulfing Manhattan. The property was a fortress of old-world elegance, shielded from prying eyes by a dense forest of ancient oaks and a formidable stone wall. This was Sterling Manor, a place that hadn't appeared in society pages for over 2 decades. This was Lena's real home. Mr. Davies escorted her into the grand library, a 2-story rotunda, where the scent of aged paper and lemon oil polish was a balm to her frayed soul. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the thousands of leather-bound books that lined the walls. Sitting in a high-backed armchair by the fire was Alistair Sterling, his face a roadmap of his 92 years. His eyes, though clouded with age, were as sharp and perceptive as ever. He was the patriarch, the titan behind Sterling Holdings, a multinational conglomerate with interests in everything from legacy media and sustainable technology to pharmaceuticals and, ironically, prime real estate. He was a legend, a ghost in the machine of global finance, and he was Lena's grandfather. He watched her as she entered his expression, a mixture of profound sadness and steely resolve. He didn't stand, but he opened his arms. Lena went to him, collapsing into his embrace, the facade of strength she had maintained in the cathedral finally crumbling. The tears came hot and silent. "He made his choice, my dear," Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. "And in doing so, he failed the test." Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes. "The test, grandfather. This was my life, my heart. It wasn't a game." "Everything is a game when a fortune of this magnitude is involved," he countered, gently but firmly. "I had to know. I had to be sure the man you married loved Lena Vance, the brilliant, kind-hearted book lover, not Lena Sterling, the heiress to a dynasty. I set a simple trap. I made it known through back channels that Sterling Holdings was looking for a new CEO from outside the family, that my sole heir was a simple girl with no interest in the business. It was bait. I wanted to see if Sebastian Thorne, a man obsessed with building his own empire, could truly love a woman he believed could add nothing to it. Today, we received our answer." The truth of it settled over Lena, a cold, clarifying weight. Her entire relationship had been the final stage of a decades-long plan to protect both her and the family legacy. Sebastian wasn't just unloving, he was unworthy. "So what now?" she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of its strength back. Alistair gestured to a large mahogany desk. On it lay a single, weighty portfolio bound in dark blue leather. "Now," he said, a glint in his eye, "you stop being Lena Vance. It is time for you to become who you were always meant to be." Mr. Davies stepped forward and opened the portfolio. Inside were documents, proxy statements, and a letter. It was Alistair's official abdication. He was stepping down as chairman of the board of Sterling Holdings and transferring his controlling interest, 51% of the company, to her, effective immediately. Lena stared at the documents, her name printed in stark black ink, Lena Sterling. "Me?" she breathed. "Grandfather. I'm an archivist. I know about 14th century manuscripts, not corporate takeovers." "Nonsense," Alistair scoffed. "You have the finest mind of anyone I know. You see patterns, you understand history, and business is merely history in the making. You have my blood in your veins, and Mr. Davies and our board will guide you. You will learn faster than you can imagine. Your first order of business, however, is personal." He pointed to a smaller file next to the portfolio. It was a dossier on Thorne Global Properties. "Sebastian Thorne believes he is a king," Alistair said, his voice turning to ice. "His entire empire is built on leverage and aggressive expansion. His flagship project, the Elysian Tower, is the cornerstone of his future. He has poured every ounce of his capital and reputation into it. But the project and his company has a vulnerability, a single point of failure." Mr. Davies opened the file. It was a property deed. "Thorne has acquired all the land for his project, except for one small, crucial parcel right in the center," the lawyer explained. "A historic, landmarked building. The city council has refused to let him demolish it. He has been trying to buy it for a year from its reclusive owner, a shell corporation based in Switzerland. He believes he is close to a deal." Lena looked from the deed to her grandfather, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Don't tell me." Alistair Sterling smiled, a rare and predatory sight. "That shell corporation is of course owned by Sterling Holdings. The deed to that building, my dear, is now yours. Sebastian Thorne's grand Elysian Tower cannot be built without your permission. His future is quite literally in your hands." Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Sebastian and Isabella were celebrating at the Glass House, a private rooftop club overlooking Central Park. Champagne flowed as they toasted to their new future. "To us," Sebastian said, clinking his glass against hers. "To building something real, something that matters." "We shed your dead weight today, darling," Isabella purred, running a finger down his tie. "That mousy librarian was holding you back. You need a queen, not a kitten. Now with our combined strength, no one can stop us. What's the first move?" Sebastian's phone buzzed. It was a frantic text. Text from his chief operating officer. "Sebastian, we have a major problem. The deal for the Oakhaven building just fell through. The sellers pulled out. Worse, we just received a notice. The entire parcel was sold this morning to a new buyer." Sebastian frowned. "That's impossible. We were days away from closing." He quickly typed back, who bought it. The reply came a moment later, and Sebastian's blood ran cold. "A company we've never dealt with before. Sterling Holdings." Isabella read the text over his shoulder, her brow furrowing. "Sterling. I thought the old man Alistair was a recluse. They haven't made an aggressive real estate play in 30 years. Why now? Why that building?" Sebastian felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. It had to be a coincidence. A bizarre, terribly timed coincidence. It couldn't be anything more. He had just discarded Lena Vance. The name Sterling was just a ghost, a phantom from the city's past. He had no idea that the ghost had just woken up. And in a library in Westchester, a woman he had called Comfort was now studying the blueprints of his empire, preparing to dismantle it, piece by agonizing piece. The game had begun. 3 days later, the name on the lips of every power player in New York was Lena Sterling. She had made her entrance not at a gala or a charity ball, but on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The article was a masterstroke of public relations, orchestrated by Sterling Holdings' veteran communications team. It featured a stunning portrait of Lena, no longer the soft, unassuming librarian, but a woman of formidable presence. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, the color of midnight, her hair styled in a sleek, powerful cut. She stared out from the photograph with her grandfather's intelligent, unyielding eyes. The headline was simple and devastating. The Sterling Succession. Alistair Sterling Seedies, control of multi-billion-dollar empire to granddaughter Lena Sterling. The story detailed her quiet life as Lena Vance, and framed it not as a deception, but as a period of deliberate observation, a princess living amongst the people to understand the world she was destined to influence. It mentioned her academic credentials, her intelligence, and her deep respect for the Sterling legacy. There was no mention of Sebastian Thorne. There didn't need to be. The society pages connecting the dots with rabid glee did that for her. The jilted bride wasn't a charity case. She was a monarch who had just been handed her crown. In his penthouse office with panoramic views of the city he planned to conquer, Sebastian Thorne stared at the newspaper, a feeling of vertigo washing over him. "It can't be," he muttered, the paper trembling in his hand. "It's a trick. A different Lena Sterling, Isabella pacing the room like a caged panther, snatched the paper from him. "Don't be a fool, Sebastian. Look at her. It's her. The hair is different, the clothes are different, but the eyes are the same." She threw the paper onto his desk. "My God, you didn't just dump her. You publicly humiliated the sole heiress to one of the largest private fortunes on the continent. You picked a fight with a ghost, and the ghost turned out to be a goddess with a 9-figure credit line." The phone on Sebastian's desk rang shrill and insistent. It was his banker from Goldman Sachs. "Sebastian," the voice on the other end said, stripped of its usual congeniality. "We need to talk about the financing for the Elysian. Given the new developments regarding the Oakhaven parcel, the board is getting nervous. The stability of the project is in question. We need assurances." Before Sebastian could formulate a reply, another call came in. It was a key investor from Dubai, pulling his 9-figure commitment. The news was out. Thorn Global's flagship project was dead in the water, held hostage by the very woman its CEO had cast aside. Sebastian felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. This wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It was a corporate catastrophe. His reputation was built on his unerring instinct, his Midas touch. Now he looked like the world's biggest idiot. "Get me a meeting with her," Sebastian snarled at Isabella. "Now. Use every contact you have. I need to get in a room with her. I can fix this. I can reason with her." "Reason with her?" Isabella laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Sebastian, you told her she wasn't good enough to be your wife. You think she's going to sell you a building out of the goodness of her heart. This isn't a business negotiation anymore. This is a blood sport." But Isabella, ever the operator, made the calls. The answer that came back was swift and chilling. "Sterling is not available. All inquiries regarding the property at 24 Oak Street are to be directed to her legal team." No further comment. The message was clear. There would be no backroom deals, no personal appeals. This would be handled by the book through layers of lawyers and corporate procedure designed to bleed him dry. Lena, meanwhile, was holding her first official board meeting in the top-floor conference room of the Sterling Tower. The room was intimidating, a sleek expanse of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. But Lena felt surprisingly calm. She had spent the last 72 hours in a pressure cooker of briefings with Mr. Davies, absorbing decades of corporate history, strategy, and finance. Her archivist's mind, trained to find and connect disparate pieces of information, took to it with astonishing speed. She sat at the head of the table, the same spot her grandfather had occupied for 50 years. The board members, a collection of seasoned, silver-haired executives who had been skeptical at first, now watched her with a newfound respect. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Our first agenda item is Project Nightingale." This was her own name for the operation concerning Sebastian Thorn. "Thorn Global has made a preliminary offer of $200 million for the Oakhaven building," Mr. Davies reported. "That's already $50 million over market value. He's desperate." "Reject it," Lena said without hesitation. A board member, a gruff man named Marcus Thorn, no relation to Sebastian, a fact that had caused endless confusion, raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Sterling, respectfully, it's an incredible offer. We could make a significant profit." "Profit is not the primary objective here, Marcus," Lena stated calmly. "The objective is leverage. The Oakhaven building is a registered historical landmark. It was designed by my great-grandmother, an accomplished architect in her own right. We are not selling it. We are not demolishing it. We are going to restore it." She slid a new set of blueprints across the table. "I have commissioned the world's leading historical preservation architects. We are going to turn the Oakhaven building into the new global headquarters for the Sterling Arts Foundation. It will be a museum, a gallery, and a center for cultural preservation. We will break ground in 1 month. The board was silent, stunned by the audacity of the move. She wasn't just blocking Sebastian. She was building a monument to everything he had tried to destroy, right in the heart of his fallen dream. It was a strategic masterclass in humiliation. It told the world, "You wanted to build a monument to greed. I will build one to culture and legacy on its ashes." The move will generate immense public goodwill. Lena continued, her voice gaining momentum. It positions Sterling Holdings as a protector of heritage, not a destroyer of it. The tax implications are highly favorable, and the long-term value to our brand is immeasurable. Any questions? There were none. For the first time, the board saw not just Alistair's granddaughter, but a leader in her own right. A Sterling through and through. The news broke that afternoon. It wasn't an attack. It was a press release about a glorious new philanthropic venture. But for Sebastian Thorne, it was a declaration of war. He watched the report on a giant screen in his office, Isabella standing silently beside him. They showed renderings of the beautifully restored Oakhaven building, a jewel of classic architecture, and then they showed the plot map with the gaping, useless hole around it, where the Elysian Tower was meant to be. "She's not just blocking me," Sebastian said, his voice dangerously low. "She's mocking me. She's turning my biggest dream into her personal passion project." He slammed his fist on his desk, the force of it rattling a glass of water. "Fine. She wants a war. She'll get one. There are other ways to bring an opponent to their knees than through real estate." He looked at Isabella, his eyes burning with a new dark fire. "I want you to dig. I want to know everything about her. Every friend, every ex-boyfriend, every secret. No one lives a life that clean. Find me a weapon. Find me some dirt. If I can't attack her fortress, I'll attack her character. I'll drag the Sterling name through the mud until she begs me to stop." Isabella smiled, a slow, wicked curve of her lips. This she understood. This was her kind of fight. "Consider it done, darling. Her fairy tale is about to turn into a nightmare." The battle shifted from the boardrooms of Wall Street to the shadowy alleys of public opinion. Isabella Rossi, in her element, mobilized her network of journalists, gossip bloggers, and social media influencers. The campaign was insidious, a slow drip poison designed to erode Lena's carefully constructed image. It began subtly. An anonymous source in a tabloid column wondered if Lena's quiet life was actually a sign of instability, a period spent recovering in a discreet European clinic. A society blog posted unearthed photos of Lena from her college days, perfectly normal photos of her at a party holding a red plastic cup. But the captions hinted at a wild past she was desperate to hide. Then the attacks grew more personal and more vicious. They targeted her competence. An inside source at Sterling Holdings leaked a fabricated story to a financial news outlet, suggesting Lena was in over her head, a puppet for the old guard board members, and that her recent philanthropic venture was a reckless vanity project that was costing shareholders a fortune. Lena felt the sting of every article, every whisper. She had expected a business fight, a war of numbers and contracts. This was different. This was an assault on her identity. "They're painting me as either crazy stupid or a fraud," she said during a late-night strategy session with Mr. Davies and her new head of security, a former MI6 agent named Kincaid. "Every move we make, they twist into a weakness." "This is Isabella Rossi's signature," Kincaid said, his tone grim. He had compiled a thick dossier on her. She doesn't fight the facts. She manufactures a more appealing fiction. She creates doubt, and in the court of public opinion, doubt is as good as guilt. So how do we fight back? Lena asked, frustration lacing her voice. Do we release statements denying every lie we'll look defensive? No. Mr. Davies advised his calm, a steadying anchor. We do not engage on her turf. We do not sling mud. Your grandfather's rule was simple. Never wrestle with a pig. You get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it. We continue our strategy, and we launch a counter-offensive of our own. But ours will be based on the truth. The Sterling counter-offensive was a quiet storm. Their legal team began filing defamation lawsuits, not with loud press conferences, but with quiet, methodical precision that sent a chill through the media outlets publishing Isabella's stories. The message was clear: if you print a lie about Sterling, you will be held accountable in a court of law. Several smaller blogs retracted their stories immediately. Simultaneously, Lena's communications team launched a series of features on the real Lena Sterling. They didn't deny the old photos. They celebrated them in a feature for Vogue titled From Campus to CEO, framing her as a relatable modern woman. They didn't hide her past as a librarian. They highlighted it, running a segment on a major news network about how her skills as an archivist, finding value seeing patterns, preserving history, made her uniquely qualified to lead a legacy company like Sterling. While Isabella was fighting a war of shadows, Lena was building an empire of light. Sebastian, however, was growing impatient. The smear campaign wasn't working fast enough. His project was stalled, his investors were fleeing, and every day the magnificent Oakhaven building, now draped in scaffolding, bearing the Sterling crest, was a reminder of his powerlessness. This is taking too long, he raged at Isabella in his office. Her reputation is barely scratched, and my empire is bleeding out. I need something bigger, something that will cripple her. I'm working on it. Isabella snapped back, the strain beginning to show on her. But she's clean, Sebastian, annoyingly clean. Her life is an open book, and the book is boring. There's nothing here. Then find something that isn't in the book, he roared. Everyone has a secret, a past lover, a family scandal. What about her parents? They died when she was young, right? Car crash. Are we sure? Isabella's eyes lit up with a cruel spark. That is an interesting question. The new line of attack was monstrous. A notorious conspiracy blogger, funded by an anonymous source, published a lengthy post titled The Sterling Tragedy Accident or Assassination. It was a vile piece of fiction weaving a tale that suggested Alistair Sterling might have had a hand in his own son's death to maintain control of the company, and that Lena's secluded upbringing was a way to keep her quiet. The moment the story broke, Lena knew a line had been crossed. This wasn't about business or revenge anymore. This was about the desecration of her parents' memory. She was in her grandfather's study when she read it, the words on the screen, blurring through a film of furious tears. Alistair, reading over her shoulder, grew deathly still. The air in the room turned frigid. For the first time, Lena saw a look on his face she had never seen before, pure, unadulterated rage. He has gone too far, Alistair said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. He has reached into my family's sacred ground and tried to poison it. He has mistaken my restraint for weakness. He looked at Lena, his eyes blazing. The time for leverage is over. The time for defense is over. Now we ruin him. He picked up the phone. Kincaid, get in here and bring me the red file. Mr. Davies, who was also in the room, paled slightly. Alistair, are you sure we agreed that was a weapon of last resort? He targeted my dead son, Alistair bit out. This is the last resort. Kincaid entered, holding a slim, crimson-colored portfolio. It contained the results of the deep-dive background check Sterling's security team had conducted on Sebastian Thorne when he first started dating Lena. It was standard procedure for the family, a way to vet anyone who got too close. Most files were thin. Sebastian's was not. Sebastian Thorne didn't build his first building with a bank loan and a dream, as his official story goes. Kincaid began opening the file. His seed money came from a man named Viktor Rykov, an oligarch with deep documented ties to organized crime. The money was dirty. We have the wire transfer records routed through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He continued, furthermore, his company has a pattern of acquiring properties through aggressive, often predatory means. For his Soho Tower project 5 years ago, a series of accidental fires broke out in the rent-controlled apartment buildings on the plot he needed forcing the tenants out. The fire marshal's report was inconclusive, but one of Thorne's junior executives was paid a substantial bonus a week later. The executive now lives in a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. The room was silent. This wasn't just dirt. This was potential criminal activity. Arson, money laundering. We held this back, Mr. Davies said quietly, because exposing it would trigger federal investigations and hurt a lot of innocent employees at Thorne Global. His concern for my innocent employees was zero when he publicly humiliated me. Lena said, her voice hard as diamond. The tears were gone, replaced by glacial fury. His concern was zero when he slandered my dead parents. He has forfeited any right to my mercy. She looked at her grandfather. He gave a single sharp nod. Kincaid, Lena commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. You are not to leak this to a gossip blog. You are to compile a full evidence-backed report. We are sending it to 2 places. She paused, taking a deep breath. This was the point of no return. The Department of Justice, she said, and the front page of the New York Times. The New York Times story broke on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't buried in the business section. It was the lead story above the fold, with a headline that hit the financial world like a seismic charge. Thorne's shadows. Investigation reveals tycoons' ties to organized crime. Allegations of arson and financial fraud. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, meticulously documented and corroborated by banking records, sworn affidavits, and off-the-record confirmations from sources deep within the justice system. It laid out the dirty origins of Sebastian's seed money from Viktor Rykov and presented a damning timeline of the accidental fires that cleared the way for his Soho project. The implication was clear and unavoidable. Sebastian Thorne's empire was built on a foundation of criminality. The fallout was instantaneous and apocalyptic. By 9:31 a.m., just 1 minute after the opening bell trading on Thorne Global Properties stock, TGP was halted as its value plummeted by 70% in a torrent of panic selling. By 10:00 a.m., federal agents from the FBI and the SEC were streaming into TGP headquarters with warrants seizing computers' servers and boxes upon boxes of files. The images of grim-faced agents carrying out the heart of his company were broadcast on a live feed on every major news network. Sebastian watched it all from his penthouse apartment, the TV screen reflecting in his stunned, disbelieving eyes. The red file. He knew instinctively that this was Lena's doing. This wasn't a smear campaign of whispers and innuendo. This was a public execution with a guillotine made of facts. His phone, which had been ringing incessantly, fell silent. His powerful friends, his investors, his bankers, they weren't calling to offer support. They were running for cover, severing all ties to a man who had just become radioactive. Isabella was there, her face ashen, her usual composure completely gone. She was frantically packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" Sebastian asked, his voice hollow. "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm getting out," she said, not even looking at him as she threw designer dresses and shoes into her luggage. "This is over, Sebastian. You're finished. The company is finished." "We can fight this," he said, a desperate edge to his voice. "You're a PR genius. You can spin this." She finally stopped and turned to him, her face a mask of contempt. "Spin this. Spin a federal racketeering investigation. Are you insane? I'm a PR executive, Sebastian, not a miracle worker. My job is to polish gems, not turds. And right now you are the biggest, most toxic turd in New York City." "But us," he stammered. "Our future. The empire we were going to build." Isabella let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Our future. I hitched my wagon to what I thought was a rocket ship. It turns out it was a torpedo aimed at the ground. You brought this on yourself. You poked the bear, no, you poked the goddess, and she tore you to shreds. And I will not be dragged down into the rubble with you." She zipped her suitcase shut. "My name was on the PR retainers, not the loan agreements with mobsters. My lawyers are already drafting a statement attesting to my complete and total ignorance of your extracurricular fundraising. Goodbye, Sebastian." She walked out without a backward glance, leaving him alone in the silent, opulent apartment that now felt like a tomb. The empire was gone. The woman he'd chosen for her ambition had abandoned him the moment that ambition became untenable. All he was left with were the ghosts of his own choices, and the memory of Lena. In the crushing silence, his mind for the first time in years was clear of the noise of ambition and greed. He started to remember things. Not the grand gestures, but the small, quiet moments with Lena. The way she'd smile when she found a rare book. How she would make him hot tea when he came home exhausted, not asking about his deals, but about his day. He remembered their walk through Central Park, in the autumn, her hand in his, and how for a few hours he hadn't felt like Sebastian Thorne the tycoon, but just Sebastian, a man in love. He had called it comfort and dismissed it as a liability. Now in the wreckage of his life, he realized that comfort, that unconditional acceptance, was the only real thing he had ever possessed. He had traded a treasure for a trinket, and the trinket had turned to dust in his hands. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and public shame. His assets were frozen. His company was being dismantled by receivers. The Elysian Tower project was officially declared dead, its vacant lot a monument to his hubris. The name Thorne, once a symbol of success, was now a byword for scandal. One evening broke, and broken he found himself standing across the street from the Oakhaven building. The scaffolding was down. The building was magnificent, restored to its former glory, its beautiful Beaux-Arts facade glowing under the warm evening lights. A banner hung above the entrance. The Sterling Vance Center for Cultural Heritage, opening soon. Sterling Vance. She had included her undercover name, the name he had known her by. It felt like a deliberate, final twist of the knife. It was a message meant only for him. I am still the woman you knew. I am still the woman you threw away. And this monument to my legacy is also a monument to your failure. He knew what he had to do. He had lost his company, his money, and his reputation. The only thing he had left to lose was his pride, and he realized it was worthless anyway. He had to see her. He had to face her one last time. The world shrinks when you lose everything. For Sebastian Thorne, it had collapsed to the size of a single city block, the one dominated by the imposing glass and steel edifice of the Sterling Tower. Getting a meeting with Lena Sterling was now harder than getting an audience with the Pope. His calls, once patched through to the most powerful people on earth, were now met with polite, impenetrable receptionists. His emails vanished into a digital abyss, likely filtered into a spam folder labeled "Disgraced Tycoons." He was a pariah, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had violently ejected him. The walls of the Sterling Empire were seamless and absolute. So he waited. It was all he had left to do. Stripped of his purpose, this vigil became his new pathetic occupation. He stood on the sidewalk opposite the tower's entrance, a man who once owned skylines, now reduced to studying the comings and goings of a single building. The press in the first couple of days had been relentless. They took photos of him, a pathetic, hollowed-out figure in a wrinkled suit, his once commanding presence replaced by a haunted, desperate air. He didn't care. Humiliation was his new reality, a garment he wore as constantly as his own skin. After the third day, the reporters lost interest, moving on to the next scandal. He was left alone with the city's indifferent crowds. People bustled past him, a river of ambition and purpose, none of them giving a second glance to the man who was once a titan among them. He watched reflections in the shop windows, not his own, which he couldn't bear to face, but the reflection of the tower. He watched the sun glint off its highest floors, the floors where she was orchestrating a world that no longer had a place for him. It was late on the third afternoon when it happened. A sleek black Bentley, silent as a shadow, pulled away from the tower's private exit. Sebastian's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew it was her car. He had bought it for her as a birthday gift, a lifetime ago. He stepped forward, not aggressively but with a defeated slump to his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the tinted rear window. For a long, agonizing moment, the car continued to move. He felt a familiar wave of despair wash over him. Of course. Why would she stop? Then, unbelievably, the brake lights glowed. The car glided to a halt. Through the dark glass, he could just make out her silhouette. He saw her head turn slightly. Then, with a subtle nod to her driver, the rear door clicked open. It wasn't a welcome. It was a summons, an invitation into the lion's den. He scrambled across the street, his legs unsteady. He slid into the opulent interior, and the door closed with a soft, definitive thud, sealing him inside. The silence was immediate and crushing, a physical weight that pressed down on him. The city's noise vanished, replaced by a stillness heavier than any conversation. The interior smelled of expensive leather, and Lena's faint, clean scent jasmine and old paper. The scent that had once meant home now triggered a deep, profound ache in the hollow of his chest. She didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her profile etched against the window as the car began to move silently through the city traffic. "You wanted to see me, Sebastian," she said, her voice a calm, level instrument. It was not angry, not triumphant, not even sad. It was chillingly neutral, the voice of a CEO addressing a minor, unscheduled inconvenience. "You have 5 minutes." The words, so devoid of emotion, were more cutting than any scream would have been. He swallowed, trying to find his voice. "Lena, he began, but his own name for her sounded foreign and wrong in his mouth. His voice cracked, and he had to start again. "I am so sorry. For everything. What I did at the altar, it was unforgivable. I know that. I was a fool. A blind, arrogant, pathetic fool." She remained silent, her posture perfect, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her stillness was unnerving. It offered him no anger to fight against, no sadness to appeal to. It was a void. He forged ahead, the words spilling out of him in a desperate, clumsy torrent. "I spent my whole life chasing a version of success that didn't exist. A phantom. I thought power was about acquiring things, buildings, companies, influence. I thought love was a transaction, a merger, a partnership that had to have a clear return on investment." He finally risked a glance at her. Her profile was like a cameo carved from ivory, beautiful and impossibly remote. Isabella. She wasn't the cause. She was a symptom. She was a reflection of my own worst impulses, the ugliest parts of my ambition. Choosing her was like choosing a part of myself I thought I needed to win. He saw a muscle flicker in her jaw, the only sign she was even listening. "I see it now," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. The polished veneer of the tycoon was gone, flayed away to reveal the broken man underneath. "I see what I threw away. It wasn't about the money, Lena. I swear to you. If I had known about your family, your name, it wouldn't have mattered, because I was too blind to see the real value right in front of me. What I threw away was you. Your kindness, your quiet strength, the way you saw me, not my net worth. I had everything that mattered in you, and I was too stupid to realize it." He finally broke the weight of his regret, crushing the air from his lungs. His shoulders slumped, and he covered his face with his hands. "I've lost everything. My company, my reputation, and I deserve it. I deserve all of it. I'm not here to ask for the building back. I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm just here to say, I'm sorry. And that I loved you. I really did. I was just too broken to know what to do with it." The car came to a smooth, silent stop. Sebastian looked up, disoriented. They were outside a small, unassuming building in Greenwich Village. For a heart-stopping second, he didn't recognize it. Then it hit him. It was the library, her old library. Lena finally turned her head and looked at him, her gaze direct and unyielding. Her eyes were clear, steady, and held no trace of the adoring woman he had left at the altar. The warmth was gone, replaced by a hard, brilliant clarity. "You say it wasn't about the money, Sebastian," she said, her voice soft but laced with steel. "But your actions say otherwise. You didn't just leave me. You publicly humiliated me in the most calculated way possible. In front of our friends, our families, and the world, you weighed my worth and found it lacking. The irony is you were simply looking at the wrong ledger." She gestured with one elegant hand toward the library window. "You see that building? That's where I was happy. That's where I felt rich. My worth wasn't in a hidden trust fund. It was in the quiet, meaningful life I had built for myself on my own terms. A life you looked at and deemed insufficient." She leaned in slightly, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of the fire she now possessed, the same fire that had belonged to her grandfather. "And then the moment you discovered your catastrophic error in judgment, you didn't apologize. You didn't repent. You and your mistress tried to destroy me. You attacked my competence, my character. And then you committed the one unforgivable sin. You desecrated the memory of my parents. You did that, Sebastian. Not a businessman protecting his assets. Not a tycoon fighting a war. a cruel man lashing out because his ego was bruised. The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had no defense. There was nothing to say. She was right on every count. "The red file," she said, confirming his deepest suspicion without a trace of triumph. "We had that information long before the wedding. My grandfather believes in being prepared. We never would have used it. We are not in the business of ruining people. It's messy and frankly beneath us. But you forced my hand. You declared total war on a person, not a corporation. You made it about my soul, my family's honor. So I had to show you what total war actually looked like." With a quiet grace, she opened her door. "This is where our conversation ends. Forever." "Lena, please," he begged, a last desperate plea from a drowning man. "Is there nothing left? No chance for forgiveness? For anything?" She paused at the door and looked back at him, her face unreadable. It wasn't pity he saw in her eyes, but perhaps the cold finality of a closing chapter. "The woman you loved or thought you loved was Lena Vance," she said, her voice softening just enough to make the words cut even deeper. "And the man she loved was a fantasy she built in her head. Neither of those people exist anymore. You destroyed them both that day at the altar." She stepped out of the car and, without looking back, closed the door. The quiet, solid click echoed the closing of a vault. Sebastian watched her walk away, her posture straight, her steps. Sure, a queen returning to her kingdom, leaving him stranded in the wreckage of his own making. The partition slid down, and the driver's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. "Where to, sir?" Sebastian Thorne had no answer. The question was absurd. Where does a ghost go? He had nowhere left to be, no one left to see. He had flown as close to the sun as a man could, but he had been burned not by the fire of his ambition, but by the ice of his own heartless betrayal. The checkmate was complete. He hadn't just lost the game. He had been erased from the board. In the end, Sebastian Thorne learned the hardest lesson of all true wealth is not measured in stock prices or square footage, but in character. And his was bankrupt. He had the world at his fingertips and chose a handful of dust blinded by a greed so profound he couldn't recognize a priceless treasure right in front of him. Lena Sterling didn't just reclaim her birthright. She forged a new destiny from the ashes of her heartbreak, proving that the greatest power lies not in what you inherit, but in who you choose to become. What do you think? Was Lena's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Could Sebastian ever truly be redeemed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that karma, like the market, always settles its debts. The winter wind bit through her threadbare coat, but Sarah Donovan barely noticed. Strolling past neon-lit windows, she couldn't ignore the relentless ache in her belly, an ache caused by hunger and the 6-month child she carried. Shivering on the sidewalk, she glanced up at a massive TV screen, blaring the nightly financial news. There, beaming under the bright studio lights, was a man she once promised to love forever. William Donovan, her husband, a multimillionaire, famous, admired, while she trembled in the cold. Her heart twisted. How had their world turned so cruel? She had nothing, and he seemed to have it all. Sarah Donovan had known hunger before, but never like this. On that frigid evening, the wind seemed to slice through layers of her clothing directly into her bones. She pulled the sides of her coat together in a desperate attempt to keep warm. Through the swirling snowflakes, She could just make out the bright, flashing monitors in Times Square. On the largest screen, a familiar face, William Donovan, appeared. His name scrolled in large letters. Tech Investor of the Year. Applause thundered behind him in the recorded clip. Brightly lit, he was addressing a hall filled with wealth power and cameras from CNN, CNBC, and local networks. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away. That face, the strong jaw, the slight smile that once reassured her everything would be all right. Now he looked polished, exuding confidence. She hadn't seen him in person for almost a year. Her chest clenched with memories of the day he walked out, arguments about money and ambition overshadowing their love. She'd tried to reason with him to support him, but each conversation ended in a new fight, culminating in the shocking decision he would succeed alone. The flickering billboard cut to a montage of images, William shaking hands with Mark Cuban at a tech conference, then introducing a pioneering piece of software in Silicon Valley. Sarah saw glimpses of glamorous parties William in a tailored tuxedo, accompanied by men and women she had never met. The talk show host concluded the segment by proclaiming, "William Donovan, America's newest business sensation." Then the screen blinked to a car commercial. Just like that, he vanished into the night. Sarah blinked back tears. There was a time William's arms had been her warm refuge, promising they'd face every storm side by side. And now, pregnant with his child, she walked alone on icy sidewalks, scrounging for a place to sleep. She was determined not to cry, but her emotions overwhelmed her as she gazed up at the ironically beautiful Christmas lights decorating the city. By all appearances, the world around her was celebrating, and she was surviving. Barely. She pressed a hand against her abdomen, feeling the slightest kick. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to the life inside her. It was a promise she intended to keep, though at that moment she wasn't sure how. When she turned away from the screen and stumbled onward, her foot snagged on a piece of broken pavement. A stinging pain shot through her ankle, and she nearly collapsed. She bit down a cry, scanning the crowd for help, but passers-by, preoccupied with their own rush of errands and holiday shopping, scarcely gave her a glance. That's what life had become after she left the small studio in which she and William once lived, alone, invisible. Sarah's pride was bruised, but she refused to crumble. She passed by a bakery. Through the window, the smell of fresh bread made her stomach twist. She had to preserve her last dollar for the cheapest motel, a place with peeling wallpaper and barely functioning plumbing, but at least it was indoors. She stepped inside, bought a small roll and devoured it in 3 bites. Outside again, the wind roared, intensifying the city's clamor. Still clutching her abdomen, she decided that tomorrow everything had to change. She would find a job. She'd scour the city for help. She would not let her child enter this world with nothing but sorrow. But for tonight, she needed a place to rest, a place that wasn't some abandoned corner or shadowed alley. Even if it cost her last few dollars, she had to prioritize the safety of the life inside her. As Sarah walked away from the mesmerizing screens of Times Square, one thought pulsed in her mind. Her husband, the man she had once loved beyond reason, was thriving. And here she was, pregnant and alone. Could the chasm between them grow any wider? Long before he was the darling of business magazines and tech summits, William Donovan was a daydreamer writing code in the corner of the local university library. Sarah remembered the first time she saw him. It was her sophomore year, and she was majoring in English literature at Columbia. The library's back table had been her favorite spot, quiet, perfect for reading. She noticed him a junior in computer science, leaning over a laptop with an exasperated scowl. Curious and drawn by the intellectual frenzy in his eyes, she'd asked, "Need any help?" Although Sarah barely understood advanced programming, the question sparked the first real conversation they ever had. William's exhausted face broke into the shyest of smiles, and she recalled thinking, "He's kind of cute under all that stress." They chatted about his class project, an algorithm for data compression. Sarah confessed she was more comfortable discussing Shakespeare than software, and he teased her gently. From that moment on, they were a constant presence in each other's lives. Their connection seemed effortless. He awakened her interest in technology's potential. She introduced him to literary classics, weaving in metaphors about love and ambition. They started dating by Christmas break of that year, with sweet, simple moments, late-night walks around campus, scrounging for cheap coffee in the student lounge, trying out new ramen spots around Manhattan. They were two dreamers, William longing to found a tech startup that would revolutionize how people shared data, and Sarah hoping to become a novelist. The future seemed limitless. She could still feel the way he used to grasp her hand whenever she doubted herself, as if to say, "We'll get through anything." Yet as graduation approached, financial stresses haunted them. William, determined to compete in the tech world, pitched his software to small investors, but faced constant rejection. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to get traction for her short stories, or even land a decent internship. Their families offered little financial support. William's parents, proud owners of a modest real estate business in upstate New York, expected him to follow a more traditional path and often expressed skepticism toward his entrepreneurial obsession. Sarah's mother, whose chronic illness drained the family's savings, couldn't help beyond a few encouraging phone calls. When they got married in a humble civil ceremony right after graduation, they were brimming with hope. Their honeymoon was a short weekend, spent in a budget motel near Niagara Falls, the only getaway they could afford. But they didn't care. What mattered was their shared devotion. They returned to New York City, renting a cheap studio apartment in Queens. William coded into the late hours, while Sarah worked as a barista by day and scribbled short stories by night. Their love burned like a bright flame until cracks began to form. William became consumed with success, obsessed, really. Each failed pitch to an investor sent him into a silent downward spiral that led to outbursts. Sarah tried to reassure him that failure was part of the journey, but her optimism only irritated him. As months dragged on, the bills piled up. William grew desperate, dabbling in risky deals with shady angel investors. They had endless arguments about money. When success finally arrived nearly 2 years into their marriage, with a major investor, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, buying into William's new software idea, Sarah hoped that would ease the tension. But ironically, it only magnified their differences. William was suddenly thrust into corporate meetings, traveling across the country, networking with high-profile entrepreneurs. Invitations to flashy events replaced their quiet dinners. He no longer came home with cheap takeout. He was gone most nights, presumably in boardrooms or at fancy parties. Sarah felt him slipping away. A year passed in that swirl of success, and Sarah was left behind, often alone, in their now upscale condo near Central Park. William's time was devoured by business calls and conferences on the West Coast. When he was home, he was distracted, fidgety, unwilling to share stories of his day. She remembered their final argument vividly. She'd asked him to spend one evening with her to reconnect. He retorted that she had no clue how hard he worked to keep them afloat, how she should be more grateful. That night ended with William storming out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. He never came back. Days became weeks. Sarah's calls and texts went unanswered. Soon bank notices arrived explaining how William had switched all joint accounts to his name alone. Sarah had no income. Worse yet, 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. Fear overrode any bitterness, but desperation set in. Rent soared, her barista job didn't pay enough, and she could no longer afford the condo. Before long, she was forced onto the street. She tried contacting William's PR office, but the line always went to a polite assistant who left her on hold until she hung up in frustration. Now, witnessing his face on the giant screen in Times Square, that entire whirlwind of a past threatened to engulf her. She reminded herself of one vow she'd made, standing in that battered apartment with an eviction notice in hand. I will survive and protect this child. If the father refused to care, she would find a way. She would not become just another nameless tragedy in the city's underbelly. Morning brought little relief from the cold. Sarah woke on a narrow, squeaky bed in the cheapest motel she could find. The heater rattled uselessly, barely keeping the air above freezing. She had about $15 left, enough for a couple of cheap sandwiches, maybe bus fare if she wanted to head to the next shelter. But Sarah was stubborn. She believed there had to be something better. She packed her meager belongings, a change of clothes, her worn copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, a phone with a cracked screen that almost never picked up a signal. Everything fit into a single bag. Every step outside felt like walking through a wind tunnel. She knew she had to find help soon. A pregnant woman living on the streets was a tragedy waiting to happen. She headed to the nearest public library, an older building with classical columns, seeking warmth and free internet to look for job openings. Inside, near the community bulletin board, she found a flyer advertising a free women's shelter in Brooklyn. It promised hot meals counseling and prenatal support. She tore off the address tab. This might be my best chance, she thought, shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in days. She hopped on a bus, ignoring the pitying looks from a couple of other passengers. Upon arrival, she found the shelter nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The building was large, with peeling paint and sagging steps, but the warmth she felt when she walked inside was immediate and comforting. A friendly volunteer named Rebecca greeted her with a kind smile. After scribbling her name on a form, Sarah was shown to a cramped but clean room, shared with 3 other women. Each cot had fresh blankets and a small side table. Meals are served at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening, Rebecca explained. We also have prenatal checkups every Friday with a visiting nurse from Bellevue Hospital. Sarah nearly cried with relief. A medical checkup was a blessing. She hadn't seen a doctor since learning of her pregnancy. Rebecca chatted with her for a while, asking about her situation. Though Sarah felt hesitant to reveal too much, there was something about Rebecca's gentle nature that encouraged honesty. She admitted her husband had left, that he was well off, and that she had nowhere else to go. Rebecca listened, never judging, then simply patted Sarah's shoulder. You'll be safe here. You'll get back on your feet. I'm here if you need anything, Rebecca offered. Those words of encouragement did more for Sarah's spirit than anything had in months. That first night in the shelter, Sarah lay in the dark, hearing the muffled snores of her roommates. She felt a faint flutter within her baby moving. I'm not alone, she reminded herself. This life inside her gave her purpose. She recalled an old Emily Dickinson line. She loved something about hope being a thing with feathers. That hope had perched in her soul, refusing to abandon her even in life's darkest corners. The next morning she joined the breakfast queue. The food wasn't luxurious oatmeal, a banana-powdered orange juice, but it was warm and nourishing. Some of the residents eyed her suspiciously. They were all at different points in life's struggles, yet in their gazes, Sarah sensed a silent camaraderie that had been missing in her life for so long. As she sat down to eat, Rebecca joined her. "We have a job support program," Rebecca said, her voice quiet. "You'd get help writing a resume, searching for openings, maybe training. I know it can be tough to find something with no stable address, but we can try." Sarah nodded eagerly. "That would be great," she replied, swallowing a surge of gratitude. She was ready to do anything office cleaning retail, anything that would help her earn enough for a deposit on a small apartment. But as she scrolled through job listings later that day, a rerun of a business show played on the shelter's TV in the lounge. They were discussing William Donovan again. A celebrity investor, Mark Cuban, had praised William's entrepreneurial drive, suggesting he was the future of American tech. Hearing the news anchor casually mention her husband's name felt like a punch to the gut. He was more successful than she'd even imagined. She took a deep breath, forced herself to look away from the screen and told herself, "This is my life now, and I'm not giving up." She wasn't sure if she hated him, missed him, or simply wished none of this had happened. All she knew was that she had to survive, and she would on her own terms. At precisely 9 in the morning the following Friday, Sarah waited in a makeshift exam room set up in the shelter's converted rec hall. Worn curtains partitioned the space. The volunteer nurse, Ms. Francis, bustled in, setting down a bag of medical supplies. She was a short, no-nonsense woman with bright, reassuring eyes. "How are you feeling, dear?" Ms. Francis asked, washing her hands and snapping on latex gloves. Sarah hesitated. She had been ignoring the dull ache in her lower back, the bouts of nausea that still came and went, and the constant exhaustion. "Better now that I have a safe place to sleep," she admitted. Ms. Francis nodded, taking Sarah's vitals, measuring her belly, and listening carefully with a Doppler for the baby's heartbeat. The rhythmic whoosh whoosh filled the air, and Sarah's eyes grew misty. This was the first time she'd heard her child's heartbeat. So strong, she thought, pressing a hand to her mouth. "No major concerns right now?" Ms. Francis informed, giving a small smile. "But you need to be mindful of your diet. Get as much protein and healthy foods as you can. And rest. Stress can harm the baby too." Sarah almost laughed bitterly. Stress was the only thing she had in abundance. But she forced a bright nod. Ms. Francis noted that Sarah would need a formal medical file at a hospital soon in case of early labor or complications. "We'll coordinate that," Ms. Francis added. "In the meantime, do you have any support person for prenatal care? A family member or—" her voice trailed. "My husband's not around," Sarah said, swallowing a lump in her throat. "No other family in the city." The nurse's expression turned sympathetic. "Well, you're not alone. We're here to help." After the checkup, Sarah felt slightly more confident. The baby was healthy. That knowledge was the anchor she clung to. She spent her afternoons in the job support program, brushing up her typing skills, practicing interview responses with a counselor named Janet. Her English degree helped. She applied for positions as a receptionist, an editorial assistant, or even a part-time tutor. Most responses came back negative. Employers didn't want someone with an unstable address, or they required advanced certifications. But Sarah persevered. Days turned into weeks. The bulge in her belly became more pronounced, and so did the heaviness in her heart. She tried to keep track of the outside world, scanning newspapers in the library for job ads, occasionally glimpsing headlines about William Donovan's skyrocketing success. One day the paper featured a photograph of him leaving a high-end restaurant with a tall, elegant woman wearing designer clothes. The photo caption labeled her as Madeline Ashford, potential new business partner. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at her own reflection in the library window, rumpled coat eyes ringed with fatigue. If William had moved on personally, was she even a memory? That evening her back pains grew sharper, and she realized with dread that her pregnancy was entering a stage where she would soon need consistent medical care. She couldn't keep skipping checkups or rely solely on the shelter nurse. She also worried about finances, diapers, baby clothes, a crib. Where would she get them? She'd joined a waiting list for government assistance, but bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. Sarah found herself weeping some nights, the future an ominous shadow. Yet each morning she recalled the baby's heartbeat, reminding herself there was no choice but forward. One particularly cold day, she forced herself to walk 3 miles in the slushy streets to follow up on a potential receptionist position. She arrived soaked and shivering. Her hopes rose when the manager, a kindly older woman, offered a temporary role answering phones at a small publishing company. The pay was minimal, but it was something. She'd start Monday. Sarah left the office hugging a folder of paperwork and feeling a glimmer of pride. I'm making progress. When she returned to the shelter, though, she found Rebecca pale-faced in the hallway. We need to talk, Rebecca said quietly, leading Sarah to a corner. Apparently an acquaintance of Sarah's had come by looking for her, a man with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit. He left a business card that read, Donovan Enterprises. Sarah's heart hammered. She stared at the card, the swirling black and gold letters. Did he say anything she managed to ask? Just that he needed to speak with you regarding a personal matter. Sarah's mind whirled. Could it be William's lawyer? One of his personal aides? Did William know she was pregnant? She never thought he would actually search for her. A swirl of anger, fear, and a strange residual hope filled her. She resolved to call the number. Maybe it was finally time for a confrontation, a reckoning. She just didn't know what to expect. Sarah picked up a battered pay-as-you-go phone, a small victory from the shelter's resource program, and stared at the business card. It bore a name, Charles Whitmore, Legal Counsel. She dialed with trembling fingers, listening to the ring on the other end. Anxiety swelled. Finally, a crisp male voice answered. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Sarah Donovan. You left your card at the shelter. Her voice sounded small. He cleared his throat. Ah, Mrs. Donovan. I'm glad you reached out. Mr. Donovan, your husband would like to set up a meeting. It's in regard to finances and certain changes to his estate. A chill ran down her spine. Was this about a divorce? She almost panicked at the thought, but she maintained composure. Why now? She asked. The question came out bitterly. Ma'am, I only have instructions to coordinate your meeting. Could you come by the Donovan Enterprises office downtown on 5th Avenue? Sarah hesitated. I can't. Not immediately. She had a job orientation. Soon she had no decent clothes and no money for a taxi. Shall we say, next Tuesday at noon, he pressed. We'd be happy to reimburse your transportation. Mr. Donovan understands how difficult the city can be. He specifically requested you meet in a neutral setting. Sarah's anger flared at the paternalistic tone, but caution prevailed. All right. Tuesday. She hung up, heart thudding. William wants to meet. Part of her raged that he would drag her into some legal affair after all this time. Another part, small yet insistent, felt relief that maybe he would acknowledge their baby, maybe do the right thing, and at least provide child support. Tuesday came quickly, and Sarah found herself rummaging through the shelter's donated clothing closet, picking out a modest black dress and a coat that fit snugly over her belly. Rebecca offered to do her hair in a simple bun. As she left, half a dozen women in the shelter wished her luck, though they knew only that she was meeting her ex. The Donovan Enterprises office towered over Fifth Avenue with mirrored glass windows. Sarah approached it anxiously, ignoring the doorman's raised eyebrow when she walked in. The marble-floored lobby gleamed, and well-dressed professionals hurried past, exuding an air of wealth. A statue of William's trademark D logo was on display near the elevators, a testament to his success. Charles Whitmore, a tall, slim man with graying hair, emerged from behind the reception area and greeted her with a polite bow. "Mrs. Donovan." "Right this way," he said, leading her to a plush conference room overlooking the city skyline. Soft leather chairs, a polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park. Everything screamed opulence. She perched on a chair, feeling out of place. Moments later, the door opened. In walked William Donovan. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and stepped forward with a hesitant smile. Sarah's throat constricted at the sight of him. He looked the same, yet different, older, more confident. She stood instinctively, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. If he noticed her rounded belly, he didn't show any immediate reaction. "Sarah," he said quietly, as though testing the word. He paused, his eyes flicking to her stomach, then back to her face. "Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were, are you?" She inhaled sharply. "Pregnant," she finished. "Yes. For nearly 6 months." A fleeting expression of shock, maybe guilt, flashed in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said. You didn't tell me." Anger boiled in her. "I tried. You cut all contact. You walked out. And..." Her voice trembled. She clenched her fists. "You were too busy with your empire to pick up the phone." He exhaled, looking pained. "I'm sorry. I truly am." He sank into the chair opposite her, rubbing his temples. "I messed up. I realize that now. I've been going through a lot, but it's no excuse." She eyed him warily, uncertain if this was genuine remorse or a performance. "So why am I here?" "Did you need me to sign divorce papers? Is that it?" William shook his head vigorously. No. That's not it at all." He looked at Charles, who stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Donovan asked me to assist in drafting an arrangement to provide you with financial support, enough to cover all prenatal care, childbirth expenses, and living costs. In addition, there's a trust fund he'd like to establish for the child." Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief that there was some practical solution, indignation that he thought money alone could fix everything, and a flicker of hope. "What about us?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Our marriage?" William gazed at her, eyes clouded. "I want to help you. And our child. I know I can't change the past, but I can at least do right by you now." He hesitated, swallowing hard. "As for us, Sarah, I can't pretend I haven't caused terrible damage. I don't expect you to forgive me instantly. But maybe with time." She wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like they were strangers. She realized she was trembling. "He's acknowledging the child," she told herself. That was step 1. Charles laid out documents referencing monthly allowances coverage for medical bills, etc. The amounts were staggering. Sarah had never seen such figures. She could live comfortably, rent an apartment, and never worry about basic needs again. But guilt gnawed at her. Should she accept this? She eyed William, her voice wavering. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not?" Before William's face was taut. "When I saw you disappeared from our condo and heard rumors you were struggling, I tried to locate you, but I was overwhelmed with expansions, new deals, then the pandemic of responsibilities. I kept putting it off." He inhaled, pained. "That was wrong. I realized I couldn't move forward, knowing you might be suffering. You deserved better." "Damn right I did," Sarah muttered, tears burning her eyes. She glanced at the legal documents. They were a band-aid solution. Maybe it was an answer for the baby. Yet a single question lingered. Could William Donovan possibly be part of my life again? She didn't sign anything that day, telling Charles she needed time to think. William offered to call her a car, but she declined, wanting to walk back to the shelter to clear her head. He handed her a card with his personal cell number, the only item that felt remotely intimate. She left the grand building uncertain whether she was stepping toward salvation or heartbreak. That evening, Sarah returned to the shelter in a daze. She found Rebecca in the kitchen, dishing out bowls of soup to the residents. Feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her, Sarah pulled Rebecca aside and recounted the surreal encounter with William Donovan. She showed her the paperwork, baffling sums of money that could turn her life around. "That's... wow," Rebecca breathed, flipping through the pages. "I've never seen so many zeros on a support agreement." She paused. "So what are you going to do?" Sarah sighed, sinking into a chair. "I don't know. Part of me feels like taking this money is the only logical choice. The baby deserves a stable life, not a mother stuck in a shelter. But another part," she rubbed her belly. "I'm scared he's just trying to buy off his conscience. If I sign, do I lose my dignity?" Rebecca placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "It's not about dignity, Sarah. It's about providing for your child and yourself. You've sacrificed so much. You deserve some security. That doesn't mean you have to let him back in your life unless you want to." Those words calmed Sarah slightly, but her mind remained unsettled. She recalled her once blazing love with William, how they'd giggle over cheap pizza late at night, how she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder while he read his code aloud. Is that man still in there, beneath the polished millionaire facade, she wondered. A part of her yearned for closure or even a chance at reconciliation. But the hurt was fresh, the betrayal still raw. The baby's well-being, however, was paramount. That same night, she carefully reviewed the documents, scribbling notes and questions in the margins, wanting to ensure she wasn't signing away any rights inadvertently. If William was sincere in his remorse, maybe she could start by accepting financial support, then see if anything else could be salvaged later. She set the papers aside, resolved to meet with Charles again in a few days. Meanwhile, Sarah's new part-time receptionist job started. She commuted by bus, then hopped the subway to a modest building in Midtown, stepping into the small publishing house. The environment was busy, yet casual stacks of manuscripts, coffee mugs on every desk, editors arguing about grammar. On her first day, she answered phones, directed visitors, and fetched coffee for staff meetings. By lunchtime, she was exhausted, but a gentle wave of triumph swelled inside her. "I'm working. I'm making strides," During a brief break, she scrolled her phone and saw a new message from William. "Please let me know if you have any questions about the agreement. Also, I hope you're doing well." That was all. So formal, yet tinged with a cautious warmth. Sarah stared at the screen, unsure how to reply, eventually typing a short, "I'm still thinking. I'm safe. Thanks." She pressed send. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to focus on her tasks. Over the following week, she gradually came to a decision. She agreed to sign the financial support arrangement, but made it clear to Charles Whitmore in an email that she didn't want William controlling her life. She insisted on having her own apartment in her own name, a modest but comfortable place near the shelter, so she could remain in the supportive environment until she felt truly stable. She also wanted the freedom to make medical and personal decisions for the baby. If William truly wanted to be involved, they could discuss visitation and co-parenting later. To her astonishment, William agreed to all of it, no arguments. He forwarded a preliminary lease for a small 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, the rent fully paid for a year. Sarah felt a surge of relief. He's taking responsibility, she thought. Maybe there was a shred of the old William left. But was she ready for more than just a transactional arrangement? Late one night, cradling the phone, she impulsively dialed his personal number. He picked up immediately, sounding anxious. "Sarah." She swallowed. "I just wanted to say thank you," she managed, "for the help." Silence filled the line, then a soft exhale. "Of course. It's the least I can do." Her voice trembled. "This baby, William, it's ours. He or she deserves 2 parents who at least respect each other." He murmured, "I'd like that. I'd like to earn your respect again. And maybe one day, your forgiveness." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She remembered how once, years ago, they could share entire nights, simply talking, dreaming. She had so many questions for him: why he abandoned her, what truly motivated his success, whether there was any love left. But for now, she whispered, "Good night, William," and ended the call. By the time Sarah was entering her 7th month of pregnancy, her life looked drastically different. With William's financial support, she moved into the small but cozy apartment. The walls were painted a cheerful cream color, and there was an extra room she planned to turn into a nursery. The furniture was minimal, just a sofa, a bed, and a kitchen table. But it was hers. Her name was on the lease. Her job at the publishing house had also become slightly more secure. The manager recognized her punctuality and diligence. They offered her an extended contract for another 3 months. With the baby coming, Sarah wasn't sure how long she could keep working, but at least she had some sense of purpose each day. She'd found a routine that made her feel human again. Wake up, check on emails, go to work, come home. Set aside half an hour to jot down story ideas and then rest. She still visited the shelter occasionally, volunteering to help with new arrivals, offering them a spark of hope in the same way Rebecca had done for her. One chilly afternoon, Sarah heard a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find William standing there, holding a small bouquet of lilies and a bag of groceries. Her heart pounded as she took in his hesitant smile. "I was in the neighborhood," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't told him her exact address. Charles must have. She had been careful with boundaries, not wanting to feel controlled. But she found herself nodding, stepping aside to let him in. He handed her the flowers, which she placed in a vase on the kitchen table. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the grocery bag. "Fresh fruit, vitamins, and a new jacket for you." The weather's getting colder. The gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she managed, smoothing her hand over her growing belly. His eyes flicked to the apartment, taking in the bare walls and modest furnishings. "It's nice, cozy," he remarked, trying to fill the silence. He glanced at her abdomen again, then back at her face. "May I ask, do you know the baby's gender?" She shook her head. "I want it to be a surprise," she said softly. "That's wonderful." William looked down, fiddling with the bag. Finally, he exhaled. "Sarah, I know showing up like this might be too forward. I'm trying to respect your space, but I'd also like to be more involved. I want to help with the doctor appointments, the nursery, anything you need." She studied him, noticing a sincerity in his gaze that hadn't been there during their last tumultuous months together. Why the sudden change, she asked. She recalled the humiliating nights she spent on the streets, clinging to her coat for warmth, while he mingled with venture capitalists. William's shoulders sagged. "When I left, I was consumed by my ambition, believing I couldn't handle a relationship. I was terrified of failing. I did fail you in the worst way. Then once success arrived, I felt emptier than ever. All I had was money, status, and a hollow sense of accomplishment." He paused, voice raw. "I realize now that none of it matters, without love, without people who truly care about you. I guess I'm trying to atone for that. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here now." Tears prickled Sarah's eyes. The sincerity in his voice shook her. "I appreciate the honesty," she said slowly. She wondered if it was real or if guilt simply propelled him now that she was visibly pregnant and vulnerable. Yet a part of her, the part that remembered how they'd once dreamed side by side, wanted to believe him. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, gesturing to the kettle on the stove. He nodded gratefully. The two of them settled at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea amidst the silence. The city traffic hummed outside. Neither knew how to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage in one afternoon, but at least they were there, trying. After a while, William cleared his throat. "I'd like to take you to your next prenatal appointment," he said. "If you'll let me. I can drive or we can get a car. Whatever you prefer." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be nice." Deep down, a small flicker of warmth lit her heart, something akin to hope. William accompanied Sarah to her next prenatal appointment at Bellevue Hospital. Ms. Francis, the shelter nurse who volunteered there, greeted them warmly, but Sarah noticed the curious glances from staff members. She imagined they recognized William. His face was plastered across business headlines. Yet to his credit, he didn't flaunt his status. He simply held Sarah's coat while she changed into a gown and asked the doctor thoughtful questions about the baby's development. They heard the baby's heartbeat again, steady and reassuring. William's expression softened, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. A powerful wave of emotion struck her. It was the first tangible moment she realized he truly cared about the child. On their way out, he placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her through the bustling hallway. She allowed the small gesture longing for closeness, yet keeping her guard up. In the hospital lobby, they unexpectedly bumped into a familiar face, Barbara Donovan Williams' mother. Her short silver hair was styled elegantly, and she wore a designer coat. She froze upon spotting her son with Sarah. "William," she exclaimed. Then her gaze flicked to Sarah's round belly, and her eyes narrowed. "I heard rumors, but I thought you two were done." Sarah instinctively braced herself. She recalled the tension with her mother-in-law, who never quite warmed to her. Barbara had always found subtle ways to criticize Sarah's family background and modest means. She also blamed Sarah for distracting William from more important ambitions. William squared his shoulders. "Mother, this is Sarah. My wife. She's pregnant with our child." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're reconciling?" she asked, voice laced with disapproval. Sarah couldn't hold back. "I wouldn't call it that," she said quietly. "We're trying to figure things out, at least for the baby's sake." Barbara sniffed disdainfully. "William, you have far too many responsibilities to let old mistakes drag you down." She eyed Sarah as if she were an intruder. "Why didn't you tell him you were pregnant sooner?" A flame of anger rose in Sarah. "I tried. He left, and I had no way to reach him. And trust me, I wouldn't call carrying your grandchild a mistake." William gently took his mother's arm. "Enough, Mother. The baby is my responsibility, and I won't have you speak to Sarah that way. We're not discussing this here in a hospital lobby." Barbara sniffed again. "We'll talk later, William." She glared at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt, then turned on her heel and walked away. Heart-pounding, Sarah noticed people staring. She blinked back, tears, humiliated by the confrontation. William's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry. She had no right to talk to you like that," he said softly. But Sarah's mind raced. She recalled how Barbara had once told her she wasn't good enough for William, that he needed a partner more on his level. Now wealthy and successful, William's family clearly saw Sarah as an obstacle. "It's fine," she muttered, though her trembling hands said otherwise. "I'll manage." They walked outside, the crisp air hitting their faces. William turned to her. "Please don't let her get to you. She doesn't speak for me." Sarah found her resolve. "I won't. But if we're going to co-parent, I need to know you'll stand by me, not be swayed by your mother's opinions." He nodded, eyes earnest. "I promise." Though his promise felt genuine, Sarah couldn't ignore the chill left by the confrontation. She remembered the nights when William's mother belittled her for dreaming of being a writer, for lacking financial security. Would that negativity poison their child's life too? Or had William grown enough to shield his new family from it? Only time would tell. On the drive back to Sarah's apartment, the tension was palpable. William tried to make small talk about the baby's due date, about nursery decor, but Sarah was lost in her thoughts. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admitted quietly, "My mother was always controlling. Part of why I left was because I felt suffocated by her expectations, by the pressure of success. I let that overshadow you and me. I'm sorry." Sarah clutched her seatbelt. "What's done is done," she said, voice steady. "Let's just focus on the future, on doing right by this baby. That's all that matters." Inside, though, her emotions churned. Could we really have a future together, she wondered? Or is it just going to be co-parenting with a man I once loved? At her apartment, he walked her to the door. "Call me if you need anything," he said softly. She nodded, uncertain if she'd ever be ready to let him fully back into her life. The final weeks of Sarah's pregnancy arrived with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Her belly felt enormous, every movement an effort. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a blend of excitement and anxiety about the impending birth. William visited regularly, bringing supplies, maternity clothes, organic food, baby items. They spoke about practicalities, pediatricians' childcare options, possible names. Yet the question of their relationship remained unresolved. At times, they fell into an unexpected closeness, sharing a laugh at a tiny onesie with silly prints reminiscing about their college days. In those moments, Sarah glimpsed the man she fell in love with, his eyes warm and tender. But the memory of abandonment always lurked. She couldn't easily forget sleeping on sidewalks, shivering in the winter cold, all while he soared to stardom. Trust would not be rebuilt overnight. One evening she typed away at a short story, her old passion for writing rekindling, when a gentle knock came at the door. She opened it to find William in casual clothes holding a large container of homemade soup. "You mentioned in passing that you craved chicken soup," he said, smiling sheepishly. "I asked my personal chef to make a batch." "Don't worry, I didn't cook it myself. That would be disastrous." Sarah's laughter slipped out before she could stop it. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He set the container down, noticing her manuscript drafts scattered across the table. "Are you writing again?" She blushed, nodding. "Just trying to get the creative juices flowing. Something for me, you know, to find myself again." He asked if he could read a snippet. She hesitated, then allowed him. He read quietly, eyes darting across the page. When he finished, he looked up, an admiring expression on his face. "This is really good," he said softly. "I forgot how talented you are." She swallowed, her heart fluttering. He was praising her, not dismissing her efforts as frivolous, like he once had. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked about the story about a lone traveler who finds hope in unexpected places. The conversation flowed naturally, reminiscent of their younger selves. At one point, he gently placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. A shared smile passed between them, something both tender and uncertain. Later that night, as he left, she lingered at the door. "William," she said softly, "I just want you to know. I see you trying. I appreciate it." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "I'll keep trying, Sarah." But the next day, chaos returned. William called her in a panic, asking her to watch the news. Another business scandal had broken out, accusations that Donovan Enterprises engaged in questionable stock trading. Rumors swirled that William's mother, Barbara, had been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating backdoor deals. William's name was splashed across headlines with tabloids, speculating about the moral integrity of his entire operation. Sarah flipped on her old TV set, seeing reporters swarm in front of Donovan Enterprises. A few sensationalist channels displayed a picture of Sarah from months ago, claiming she was the estranged wife carrying the heir to a troubled empire. She felt nauseous. Was she about to be dragged into the public eye? William texted, "I'm sorry. This is out of control. I never wanted you to be involved." She fought the urge to panic, but the stress weighed heavily, and within hours, mild contractions started. She was only 36 weeks along, a bit early, but still within a safe range. The contractions weren't severe yet, but she felt them enough to know her body might be preparing for labor. She called Miss Francis, who advised her to rest and hydrate, warning her to come to the hospital if things intensified. Night descended, and the tabloids kept spewing stories. A photo of Barbara, stern-faced, refused to speak to reporters. They insinuated that William's entire fortune could be at risk. Sarah tried not to care about money, but she worried about the baby. If Donovan Enterprises collapsed under scandal, would her child be caught in the crossfire of a messy public fiasco? When William arrived at her apartment, he looked drained, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry for the media circus," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea my mother was involved in shady trades. I've fired the people responsible, but the damage is done." Sarah tried to remain calm, but the Braxton Hicks contractions flared, causing her to wince. William noticed immediately fear flashing across his features. "Are you okay? I think—" She paused, breathing through the discomfort. "I might be in early labor." His face paled, and in that moment, all talk of scandal and business melted away. "Let's get you to the hospital," he said gently, helping her gather her things. As they hurried out, Sarah realized a new chapter was beginning. Whatever storms raged outside, she was about to bring a child into the world, and she needed William's unwavering support. Inside the maternity wing at Bellevue Hospital, time seemed to slip into a blur of fluorescent lights, medical chatter, and waves of pain. Sarah was admitted with mild contractions that by midnight turned fierce. William stayed by her side, gripping her hand through each surge. Sweating and trembling, Sarah alternated between tears and focused breathing, clinging to the promise that soon she'd hold her baby. It was a tumultuous night. At one point, the baby's heart rate dipped slightly, prompting quick action from the medical staff. Fear stabbed through Sarah. She locked eyes with William, seeing raw terror reflected there. In that moment, all bitterness faded, replaced by the realization that they both desperately wanted their child to be safe. The baby's heartbeat stabilized, and relief flowed. Hours crawled by. Finally, near dawn, Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to push. Nurses coached her, encouraging her to bear down. She felt like every muscle in her body was on fire. William murmured supportive words, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. With a final guttural cry, she felt the release of pain and the sudden miraculous wail of new life. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming newborn. A rush of emotions seized Sarah. Love, relief, awe. She reached out trembling arms as they placed the baby on her chest. Shocked by the warmth of that tiny body, tears streamed down Sarah's face. William's eyes glistened too, a rare vulnerability she'd never seen in him before. "Welcome to the world," Sarah whispered, voice choked, pressing a kiss to the baby's wet forehead. The little girl quieted, opening her eyes for a brief second, as if trying to focus on her mother's face. Later they moved Sarah to a recovery room. William remained close, pacing the hallway, on calls to his legal team, but always returning to check on Sarah and the baby. He smiled whenever he saw them together, as though the world outside, with all its scandal and drama, had lost its power here. Barbara tried to visit, but Sarah requested only William and the medical staff be allowed in. She wasn't ready to confront her mother-in-law. Not yet. Meanwhile, word arrived that the scandal at Donovan Enterprises was being resolved. William had stepped forward, taking responsibility for corporate oversight lapses and cooperating with regulators. He was determined to repair the damage rather than hide. 2 days passed in the hospital, a whirlwind of feeding diaper changes and exhausted naps. Sarah watched William hold their daughter, marveling at how gently he cradled her. They hadn't formally picked a name. Sarah had half a dozen favorites. While gazing into her daughter's round, curious eyes, she decided on Hope. It felt fitting. This tiny baby was the embodiment of new beginnings. When discharge day came, William insisted on driving them to Sarah's apartment. He carefully carried the car seat, setting it up by the living room couch. Sarah gently unbuckled Hope, lifting her close. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet apartment, the hush broken only by soft baby sighs. "I want to make a pledge," William said, voice low. "To be here for you and Hope, always. I know I can't erase the past, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make our future better." Sarah gazed at him, then at Hope. Her heart brimmed with a kaleidoscope of emotions: uncertainty, gratitude, a cautious desire to heal. "It won't be easy," she murmured. "We have a lot to work through, but I'd like to try." He exhaled relief, flooding his features. "We'll go at your pace. Whatever you need." She nodded, tears glimmering. Over his shoulder she saw a reflection in the window herself, William and Hope in his arms forming a fragile family portrait. Perhaps fate had brought them full circle. The child they created now bound them with a love that neither betrayal nor success could sever. For weeks they navigated those uncharted waters. William balanced corporate responsibilities with fatherhood, often losing track of time as he admired his sleeping daughter. Sarah slowly let her guard down, recognizing that while forgiveness would be a journey, she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. Each day, she felt stronger. Each day, baby Hope grew a reminder that life could emerge triumphant, even from heartbreak. Whether or not Sarah and William's relationship would fully mend remained to be seen. But for the first time, she believed in second chances. In a world as unpredictable as theirs, one truth shone clear: love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. And so from the frigid sidewalks of homelessness to the gentle warmth of a newfound family, Sarah and William's story shows that life rarely unfolds as expected, but hope can spark miracles. Their journey reminds us that every hardship carries the seed of possibility, and every broken bond can mend with genuine remorse, forgiveness, and perseverance. Thank you for joining me in this emotional roller coaster of heartache, redemption, and rebirth.